Namanya Aranza, tapi dulu kan itu nama Latin ya, Arancha. Tapi orang-orang Indonesia dulu nggak bisa pronounce, jadi
Ya, of course.
Arancha, jadi Ansha.
Anjay, ya. Pasti. Ini pada tinggal di mana, by the way?
Sekarang aku lagi di Indonesia, Jakarta karena
Oh, oke.
COVID ya.
Siap. Kuliah di?
University of Greenwich di London.
Kalau aku lagi di Medan, Pak.
Oh, sama lagi nih.
Iya, lagi di Indonesia.
Maksudnya kuliah ini lagi, maksudnya apa namanya?
Erik.
Learn from home, apa namanya kalau itu? Kan kalau kerja work from home, kalau belajar di rumah tuh banyak.
Study from home.
Oh, Mas Erik orang Medan ya?
Iya.
Nice.
Kota Medannya atau Medan mana, Mas?
Di Kabupaten Deli Serdang, Coach.
Oh, siap. Berarti Melayu atau Batak?
Bukan. Aku Chinese.
Oke. Bukan Chinese ya? Bukan Batak ya? Kan ada suku-sukunya berarti? Oh, belum lama di sana?
Iya, ada suku-sukunya. Mostly di sini antara Batak sama Melayu. Gitu.
Iya, di sana yang ini kan. Tapi mukanya kayak Melayu sih. Saya yang kayak Chinese malah. Saya dari Palembang saya. Mukanya sipit-sipit begini.
Wong kita galau
ya. Saya itu kapan bikin acara sama Kemenpar di Samosir di Toba. Itu pesertanya 60.
Berarti kemarin coach datang?
Datang pas belum lockdown ya. Lalu bikin acara 2 hari.
Tak kirain yang kemarin yang ada Leodranya itu.
Oh enggak, saya hanya workshopnya. Jadi ya jadwalnya beda tuh. Nah, itu yang ngisi kan pesertanya UMKM dari ya sekitaran Samosir sih, ada Toba, Samosir apa gitu. Itu satu ruangan waktu awal kaget kita kayak galak-galak banget kan ngomongnya bahasa Batak. Padahal ya emang seperti itu kan ngomongnya. Biasanya kan kalau ketemu teman dari Medan kan paling 1, 2, ini 60 orang ngomongnya ngegas semua kalimatnya.
Apalagi Batak asli di sana.
Iya, kencang-kencang
lebih
banget.
Kental.
Pak, saya mau tanya Pak, katanya. Oh iya. Tapi setelah beberapa jam, oh ya oke. Tapi baik-baik sih mereka. Emang ya kondisinya. Tapi saya kemarin ke Toba itu emang keren sekali ya. Saya sampai terpukau-pukau tuh. Saya pikir just another danau lah ya gitu. Lake, it's just a lake gitu.
Itu keren banget sih Lake Toba.
Waduh, udah pernah?
Ya, aku juga udah pernah ke Medan. Aku memang orang Sumatera, orang Padang. Jadi kita road trip Medan ke Padang.
Sampai ke Samosirnya? Ke tengahnya?
Iya, ke Samosir.
Iya, maksudnya ya saya ngebayanginnya paling ngeliat danau. Danau kan di Jakarta ada ya, danau-danau Sunter gitu. Paling danau apa sih? Jadi nggak kepikiran.
Ini kayak laut ya, Coach ya, jadinya.
Makanya maksud saya itu loh yang disayangin sama Indonesia tercinta ini ya. Maksudnya orang Indonesia aja nggak tahu kalau Toba tuh secakep itu. Kalau kita nggak dipaksa ke sana kan nggak tahu ya.
Maybe transportation links-nya juga masih harus di-develop juga ya, karena kan harus the drive up to there is very far.
Iya. Tapi maksudnya
gini, developing kok.
Orang Indonesia ini kan kalau udah cakep banget pasti dikejar tuh sama dia gitu loh. Jadi mestinya dibalik, jangan nunggu cakep baru datang.
sebelum orang-orang lain datang gitu udah datang.
Zaman dulu Bali jelek kan juga itu lalang belalang semua orang kejar-kejar kan gitu loh. Jadi jangan nunggu bagus malah. Sebenarnya anyway sih Pak LBP kayaknya terus bagusin ya. Dia invest gede-gede di sana kan. Saya waktu mendaratnya lewat airport yang baru itu. Apa tuh namanya?
Borong-borong ya?
Apa sih namanya itu? Waduh itu menakutkan minta ampun.
Kecil soalnya ya.
Airport yang mana?
Si Bolga, apa namanya ya? Saya lupa.
Di dekat Bali G sana nggak sih?
Oh, yang di atas gunung itulah pokoknya.
Oh, oke.
It's a international thing sih, tapi it's so small.
Bandara Internasional Silangit.
Silangit ya.
Sore Pak Maliki.
Sore.
Tapi it's amazing, maksudnya.
Ya.
Kan mereka bilang serpihan surga itu, ya saya sih belum pernah ke surga ya, tapi ya at least indah lah ya. Bisa lah ngalah-ngalahin Switzerland dikit lah.
Iya.
Kalah Switzerland. Lake Toba.
Maksudnya kok saya baru tahu ada danau tuh segede itu, bahkan di tengahnya ada danau ya. Sorry, ada pulau ya. Saya tuh nggak ngebayangin. Saya pikir tuh paling ngeliatnya dari pinggiran gitu ya. Pas lihat, oh memang keren. Walaupun spooky ya ya.
Iya benar, spooky.
Ada, saya bisa ceritain kesepukiannya semua nanti lah, next time. Itu benar-benar spooky. Karena kita VIP kan dikasih kamar sendirian kan, gede, luas gitu. Tapi waktu malam, oh shit, mendingan kita berdua. Karena
tapi masih sepi banget mungkin ya, Coach?
Ya kalau pas di restonya rame ya. Pas saat ke kamar kan ya just you and the big room gitu. Jadinya. Tapi ya gitu. Tapi ya kalau buat bule sih senang ya. Bule kan memang senangnya kan yang begitu-gitu. Saya dulu pernah ke Belitung, ada hotelnya siapa gitu ya, bagus sekali. Itu kamar mandinya di luar gitu. Jadi kayak nggak ada atapnya gitu.
Kayak di Maldives.
Dan kalau siang kan keren banget gitu ya. Kalau malam kan ngeri sekali. Tapi ya begitu. Anyway, nanti rundown-nya siapa dulu?
Jadi Pak Maliki pertama, Coach Farhan nomor 2, Bapak Ali Gufron ketiga, and lastly Bapak Teguh Dartanto.
Oke. Saya kira saya ketiga.
Oh,
ganti.
Kalau mau ketiga juga nggak apa-apa. Tapi itu rundown-nya sih di schedule.
Di schedule, kalau nggak salah yang diberikan terakhir tuh ketiga.
Oh gitu ya. Jadi schedule. Oh, oke. Alright.
Let me check.
By the way, saya belum bisa share screen nih. Kayaknya.
Harusnya Pak Teguh Dartanto, Mas Farhan dulu, terus saya.
What do you think, Mas Erik?
Oh, dikarenakan ini Pak Teguh nggak bisa hadir, berhalangan hadir, jadi nanti ditampilkan videonya aja. Jadi Pak Teguh udah nge-record.
Oh.
Jadi dinaikin lagi. Coach belum bisa ini ya, share screen ya?
Tadi kayak masih disable. Belum dikasih co-host ya.
Sorry Pak Gufron.
Sorry Pak Gufron. Mungkin boleh di-unmute Pak. Lagi commute.
Oh iya, sorry.
Apa kabar Pak?
Baik, mohon maaf tadi masih please wait seperti itu.
Iya.
Ya. Ini jadi jam 11 ya di sana?
Ya kalau di UK jam 11 Pak.
Oh iya, iya. Kita jam 5 nih.
Kita menyambutnya selamat siang atau selamat sore nanti?
Ya siang dan sore.
Siang menuju sore.
Ini
Selamat Pak Gufron.
Dari Jakarta.
Iya di Jakarta ini.
Iya Pak, kita semua Jakarta kayaknya.
Oh iya.
Sorry, iya. Indonesia, mau Indonesia.
Iya, baik Pak Maliki.
Sore Pak Gufron.
Sore. Dulu waktu sebelum COVID sih saya beberapa 2 kali kalau nggak salah ya ikut ISIK ini dari PPI UK.
Oh.
Berarti sudah pernah Pak ya?
Udah
Jadi
pernah.
Udah tahu ya.
Iya, tapi di UK saya kesana.
Iya.
Ya sebelumnya memang kalau ini karena online semua jadi.
Iya. Ya sekarang sulit kita keluar sulit, masuk juga sulit.
Kalau nggak biasa on the spot memang.
Kebetulan saya tahun 2017 itu kan diundang di Coventry untuk mendapatkan doktor honoris causa tentang jaminan kesehatan. Nah, terus diminta pidato atau ngisi kuliah juga di Nottingham juga.
Tahun berapa Pak?
2017, lalu 2018 ke sana lagi, 2019 juga kelihatannya.
Oh, berturut-turut ya, habis itu COVID.
Iya, itu COVID udah enggak. Udah.
Iya.
Kebetulan saya dulu di Dikti. Salah satu di Dikti, salah satu dirjen Dikti saya. Kemudian di Istek Brin yang sebagai ketua untuk COVID, untuk inovasi, jadi ketua konsorsium riset inovasi COVID. Terus sekarang di BPJS.
Oh, Masya Allah, long way, banyak steps-nya ya. Step.
Sebelumnya saya di Rektor Trisakti juga, kan ada putranya dosen di Trisakti yang dari ketua ISIK waktu itu.
Apa ya?
Kalau saya kenal ibunya lupa dia.
Oh.
I told you no internet. If you cannot listen, I will do on iPad.
Kita tunggu dulu ya, as more people come in.
Ya,
Jadi teman-teman kapan kemungkinan kembali ke UK?
As soon as possible, Coach.
Tapi udah mulai ini, udah mulai buka ya, belum?
Kalau untuk student sih udah bisa kok, Coach.
Ininya apa? Summer ya? Sekarang lagi summer ya? Atau?
Iya, lagi
Holiday.
Summer? Oke. Semulai September ya?
Iya,
Yes,
nanti
September.
September baru.
Kalau aku sih lagi nunggu vaksin kedua biar di sana nggak harus karantina kan. But we'll see how it goes.
Tapi vaksin di sini bukannya nggak ini?
Udah vaksin yang pertama AstraZeneca, tapi kan AstraZeneca kan jedanya 8 sampai 12 minggu kan. Jadi belum tahu kapan dapatnya.
Iya. Tapi bisa pakai AZ bisa ya? Bisa diterima?
Bisa diterima.
Kalau saya nungguin yang Pfizer aja, sebentar lagi.
Iya. Aku juga waktu itu mau nungguin Pfizer, katanya kan Juli kan, tapi pas Juli belum datang juga.
Iya, Agustus kan. Iya. Ini Delta ini sangat menakutkan ya. Iya.
betul sekali.
Pak, aduh, sedih sih, cuman ya, penting semangat dulu.
Ada 92 anjing.
Oke, kita tunggu 4 menit lagi ya.
Oke.
Increasing, but also how to deal with the
Ini kalau linknya link umum atau individual link?
Ini khusus ini aja, Coach. Kalau link yang dikasih.
Oke.
Oke, 1 menit lagi ya.
Mbak Rahmi, paling gampang gini Mbak, aduh saya COVID nih, positif.
Oke, kita mulai ya. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to the 20th Indonesian Scholars International Convention. Selamat sore di Indonesia dan good morning in the UK. I am Aranza Infra and will be moderating today's session of social development. This session will be discussing the preparation for future social crisis, in particular, reevaluating the weaknesses of current social systems and safety net exposed by COVID-19. This event is sponsored by Ben E. London Branch, the University of Nottingham, and the Ministry of Tourism and Creative Economy of the Republic of Indonesia. Before we start, I would like to welcome and introduce our wonderful guest speakers here with us today. First, we have Bapak Maliki Ahmad, the Director for Alleviating Poverty and Development of Social Welfare in the Ministry of Planning, or in Indonesian, Bappenas. Our second speaker, Farhan Shahjaya, is the founder of social technology NGO Wiranesha Foundation and Coach Farhan Academy. Our third guest speaker is Honorable Bapak Ali Gufron Mukti, who is the President Director of the Social Security Administration Body for Health, or also known as CEO of BPJS Kesehatan. And lastly, Bapak Teguh Dartanto, who is the Acting Dean of Universitas Indonesia's Economic Undergraduate Program, and also the Head of Poverty and Social Protection at the Institute for Economic and Social Research. Unfortunately, he is unable to attend here live, but he has prepared a recorded slide for us, so he will still be doing his part. There will be room for questions afterwards, but let's start with the session. Jadi yang pertama, Bapak Maliki Ahmad.
Langsung nih Mbak. Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi bagi rekan-rekan yang ada di UK dan juga selamat sore bagi rekan-rekan yang ada di Jakarta. Good afternoon for those who study in Jakarta, and also good morning for those who still stay in London or in UK. First, I would like to thank for organization that already invite me for this prestigious event to speak on the social protection reform in Indonesia. So to make it brief, I would like to focus my talks on the Indonesia social protection reform that has been established around 1 year ago, right after the pandemic COVID. For the background is that, let me share. So, as we already know that Indonesia has been enjoying the high economic growth. Usually we have like higher than 5% of the economic growth, and it leads to lower poverty as well as the unemployment rates. So it's been like, I think the last 5 years, just like the pandemic COVID, the poverty rates are declining, as well as the unemployment rates. And lucky us also, and good for us that starting from 2015, when we right before 2015, that we already reached like the highest Gini ratio. So that means like the highest inequality. But then after 2015, the inequality itself is already declining. So this is quite a remarkable achievement for Indonesia. And we also achieved like a single-digit poverty rates in 2018 for the whole history in Indonesia. By that time, we already reached like 9.66. But then the pandemic hits us in 2019. It's really hurts a lot of our achievement, including the poverty rates as well as the unemployment rates. So if there was no policy interventions during 2020, the poor people would increase by like 4 million in Indonesia. The difference between our financial crisis and in 1997 and also between the financial crisis in 1997 and also the pandemic COVID, we have actually already like developed quite good social protections. Basically, our social protections consist of two systems. One is the social insurance, and the second one is the social assistance. Here, Pak Gufron is one of the board of directors of the social security on health, or JKN, and we have also the National Social Security on Labor. So basically, these two systems try to cover and also secure all the populations of Indonesia in both ways. One is on health and the other one is on labor. And Indonesia also subsidize like almost like 40% of the populations, the poorest of the populations, for paying the insurance premium for the health. So this is one that we never have during the financial crisis in 1998. And the second system is on the social assistance. After the financial crisis in 1998, we have quite a lot of like a social assistance, including the RISE subsidy, and then the poor student scholarships, also a lot of like productive economy programs, as well as other cash assistance. But now we quite organize all of this social assistance and converging into two systems. One is on conditional cash transfers, and the other one is non-conditional. So during the pandemic of it, we actually have already also these two systems, but then because the effect is quite huge, then we try to interfere this effect into other type of the assistance. So basically, during this pandemic, we have like a more established system as well as actually more established data. So this is what we estimated, that if we don't have any intervention during the pandemic of it, we will have like more around more than like 4 million new poor people, if there were no policy interventions. But then if, I mean, we already have the interventions, and then we, as a result, is into October 2020, September 2020, we have the poverty rates increased until 10.18, I guess. So this is because we can like dampen the effect of the pandemic of it, starting from 4 million into around 2 million new poor people. But then, as you know, that now the pandemic COVID has come into like a second wave. We have again estimated the new poor, I guess. Hopefully, it is not as high as the first round. And also if it's can conclude as soon as possible. What is the intervention during the pandemic of it? So we have like 4 components of the social safety nets and also the economic recovery. And we categorize it as like 4 types. One is on the health access. We have the premiums for the health insurance, as well as we also have some premium relaxations and also payment postponement of the premiums. The basic needs itself is quite comprehensive. One, we provide like a basic needs, food and electricity, to reduce the burden of the poor and also the vulnerable, and also providing the sufficient for the children. And also the job security, we provide unemployment benefit, providing reskilling programs, as well as providing a financial incentive for micro, small, medium enterprises. Last one is on economic recovery. We have the financing additional capital and loan restructurization for ultra micro enterprises, providing working capital for state-owned enterprises, as well as the other incentive programs. So this is the whole interventions programs during the pandemic of it. But then right after the pandemic of it, we realized that our social protection have to be more replenished, as well as more concise, to be adapted to for more shocks like natural disaster, climate change, as this social disaster like pandemic COVID. So then we have this. We are going to start the social protection reform, and this one is already approved by the president, starting on this January 2021. Why we need to have this reform is that we actually have to. One is that once we have like this kind of disaster or shocks, then we can have like a more better response on this kind of shocks, as well as not only like natural disaster, but also the climate change, and also the social disaster like this pandemic COVID. We have like 6 reforms on the on our social protection. One is, like during the pandemic of it, we realized that we really need to have more complete data. We already have like by name, by address, around 40% of the poorest population. But because of the pandemic of it, the effect is quite huge. It is not only like affected the 40% of the poorest, but also like all the middle income, the middle group populations is affected, and they have become vulnerable, even they become poor. So it makes us think that we have to create a more general, like a population database that consisting of the social economic conditions of these populations. We call it a social economic registry. It will complement our administration's data or admin. Okay. And then we also try to create like adaptive social protections. Adaptive meaning is that we have to have like the social protections adaptable to any shocks. Either this is natural shocks or like a social shocks like as pandemic COVID. So with us like the existing established social protections, once there is a natural shocks, then we can like a more response and a quick response for this type of shocks. And then we also have to advance the data for digitalizations and also delivery mechanisms of the social protections. We also have the financing reform. Not only, I think we have to synchronize between the funding from the government with like a local government as well as the non-government. So this is actually there's a lot of like a very powerful funding sources like a non-government, but then we need to harmonize, also to integrate and also synchronize these programs of this that coming from the other sources. So this is we call it like a financing reform to ensure the sustainability of the programs. As well as that, we have to have like more inclusive social protection. That's including the social protection for the most vulnerable, such as the disability, as also the people with disability, with the elderly people with disability, as well as the vulnerable children. And then we also have to have integrations. The whole programs, not only like the social assistance, also the social protection, social insurance, but also the program for the entrepreneurship program. I think Coach Faham is going to go to talk about the entrepreneurial. So this is the one that actually have to be sustainable and also continuation between the social protection system with the entrepreneurship that can empower the economic of the poor people. This is the system of the social protection that is adaptive to any natural shocks and the climate change, as well as the social shocks. So these adaptive social protections meaning to increase the prevention system, disaster prevention system. So we try to ensure the response of the social protections to prevent hazardous events. So this one is we have to improve our data integrations, income stabilizations, and also natural resources management improvement. Also, we have to prepare and then residual risk retention and transfers, as also like improve the response system of the natural shocks into a more stronger social protections. The last one is that we have to have like a recovery and also reconstruction program. That's not only including the social assistance, but also the insurance system, as well as the entrepreneurship system in our pocket. And the other types of what we call the adaptive social protection system have to be equipped by new architectures of the G2P reform, digitalization of the transfer system of the social assistance, as well as the entrepreneurship system. So this is the one that we are going to pursue in next few years, that the beneficiaries have to choose the providers or services based on their needs. Also, we are trying to expand the choices of the accounts and also the providers. Now we have only like Himbara Bank. We are thinking that we are, I mean, all the whole like social assistance, also the social insurance system have to be a broader system, not only like Himbara system, but also include the non-Himbara bank, also server-based e-money insurers, as also the post services. And then to strengthen our data management, we also include the central mapper that is easier and also well-targeted distributions. We are trying to develop the institutional setting as well as the regulatory framework. The last one, we are going to widen the payment instrument options. Then it is to strengthen the interoperability, expand choices to utilize the benefits. Yeah. So this is including how actually the beneficiaries can cash the benefit, such as like through the ATM, through agents, bank branches, as well as the merchants.
Zoom floating video.
Floating video. Our social
Zoom.us has new window. Zoom.us has new window. You are in the meeting hosted by menu.
Our vision of the social protection system is that our social insurance have to be provided by the whole populations. So in 2024, I think 100% of the populations have to have the health insurance, worker accidents, life insurance, pension, old age savings, and also the long-term care. So this is including the whole, like upper class to the chronic poor. But then we also have the social assistance in the other sides that is only provided to those who actually proper to receive it, such as the vulnerable, poor, and chronic. So this is actually adjustment to the current system. For now, the assistance for the social insurance premium for the JKN are received by like 40% of the poorest. Later in the future, we are going to adjust it only those who are vulnerable and also the poor, as well as the food assistance and also the cash conditional cash transfers. This is the one that we actually are trying to more focus and also more accurate targeting. So they are going to be received only by the poor and also the chronic poor. So by these ones is to ensure that the social assistance will be given to the right person, and also to fasten the poverty reduction, and hopefully to achieve the chronic poverty, the chronic poor poverty rates to zero, hopefully in 2024. Lastly, is that we have also the basic services that have to be provided by the whole population, and also the social services. Social services is for those who actually need it, such as like children, neglected children, vulnerable children, also people with disability, and also the older population. This is have to be also improve the quality, so in order to also support it to the whole population. So I think this is my end of presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bapak Maliki Ahmad, Director for Poverty Alleviation and Community Empowerment at Bappenas, for your insightful presentation on social security that I'm sure has given all of us a deeper insight on Indonesia's components and developments of its social safety net and economic recovery. Our next speaker for this session is Bapak Farhan Shahjaya, the founder of social technology NGO Wiranesha Foundation and Coach Farhan Academy. You have the stage.
Thank you, Mbak. Let me just open the file. Sorry. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for E6 team for inviting me. This is my first time actually. Good morning not morning. Good evening from Jakarta. Maybe good morning for our friends in UK and area. Thank you, Pak Maliki, Pak Gufron, for the jam session together. So I think continuation with the Pak Maliki presentation about the planning from the government. There are several items that related to entrepreneurship. Entrepreneur is currently in Indonesia is a sexy, what you call it, a sexy terms. I mean, everybody like looking into it. I mean, everybody want to be entrepreneur, especially when the business is tough, unemployment rate increase. Some even, They close the mall, close all the sectors that basically employed many people. So everyone now want to become entrepreneurs. The thing is, entrepreneurs is always like I can call it I don't know, in Indonesia maybe call it a gaib, yeah. It's mystery. I mean, people say it's easy to be entrepreneur, but it's not just like that. So my experience doing this entrepreneurship has been 5 years. So by get invited from E6, this is actually a good moment because I'm launching my programs. It's called Digipreneur, digital entrepreneur, but with the one word we call social. So they actually two terms: a digitalpreneur and then socialpreneur. Why it has to be two words? I will explain in my presentation. Okay, this is me before the lockdown, before the pandemic, still slim and a bit young. Yeah. And in the real world, it's not that young. I get my doctorships. I mean, my doctor actually for my entrepreneurship. So currently, entrepreneur is my blood lah, my passion too, my obsession too maybe. Been working for several US company and also multinational company in Indonesia. Got my master degree from United States. Almost went to UK, but it didn't happen that time. So currently also the member of Research Council for Jakarta. So I'm doing research, especially in economics and finance. Actually, our former heads of Dewan Research is actually also from Bappenas. Currently, I'm also get invited talking about entrepreneurship, digital, and especially social. So you can see me a bit in Bahasa Indonesia is Narcis. So I always get my programs covered by media. So it's easily to find me in Google. So just gonna skip it. I am also working on the collaboration with government. Yeah, actually I also have a collaboration with BPJS, but BPJS Ketenagakerjaan, employment. So also working with the swasta, the technology company. So I'm gonna start from here. I think Pak Maliki has showed the whole perspective from government. I think people have seen these numbers already, but this is pretty much interesting. Why it's interesting? Because number of SME, so micro, small, medium enterprise is, you can call it about 64 million. This is interesting because it's still excluded the young people. They call it, yeah, you can call it big boomers, millennials, yeah. But it's, I think most of the young people, I think, yeah, will turn themselves into entrepreneurs. So the numbers can go easily to 100 millions, yeah, entrepreneurs in Indonesia by, I don't know, the next 1 or 2 years. I think they're currently still in high school, but the next 2 years, they're gonna be entrepreneurs. Why entrepreneurs? I don't think they are willing to work 9 to 5. Yeah, they want to travel, they want to see the world. That's what they say. That's definition is actually belong to entrepreneurs. But if you break down the number of the 64, I put the percentage. The 68.6, or you can say the most majority is micro. Micro, it means entrepreneurs that has omset, yeah, omset per month or revenue per month is lower than 25 million or 25 juta per bulan. And you can see the number of small business is actually 1.2, and then the medium is 0.06. So we still have, you know, this big chunk of numbers is actually micro enterprises. Another fact is also interesting. 97 of the jobs in Indonesia is actually absorbed by entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs hire people, some's formal, some's informal. And then from the data also, Entrepreneurs also contribute to 60% of Indonesia GDP. Of course, this numbers is before the pandemics. It's a challenge for entrepreneurs currently. Okay, so before it's the numbers, now it's the problems. Yeah, I think the first one is very interesting. It's also give me a shock. First, the numbers of micro, small, and medium has not changed significantly. What it means is, if you are a micro entrepreneur, 10 years later, you're still a micro. If you are a small or medium, 10 years later, you're still, same position. So they are not moving. They just like staying. The second one is lack of collaboration, overlapping programs. There's some ministry that also handle entrepreneurs. They also overlapping between kementerian or ministry, and also you can call it Pemprov or Pemda, the cities or the province too. And then number three, this is, I think, after some years of independence for Indonesia, unfortunately, until now we don't have the big data. We do have the number 64 million, but we don't know them. We don't have the the names, the business, everything. So we don't have the big data. So it's a bit challenge, yeah. I think when we want to dig down, or we want to create a policies without the big data. So that's also my obsession, yeah, how to get the big data, but at least give a real complete, view or position. And then the number 4, the curriculums, the training, the workshop. Every time, at least for my experience, the past 5 years, the curriculum are the same. I mean, if you're micro, if you're small, and then you're medium, the curriculum just stay the same. So you can imagine ibu-ibu or mom and pops that has a revenue of 5 million or 5 juta per month. They get, for example, learning or material or content about export, for example. Of course, they cannot use it, and then it's just too far away. So this is also a challenge. MSME or UMKM in Indonesia, it seems like they're like one body. Actually, it's not. It's a 3 different people, 3 different businesses. And of course, the number 5 is the integrated marketing, sales, and capital. So it's like, if you want to do marketing, you going here. If you want to go sales, you go here. If you want to get loan or capital or permodalan, you go here. It's just too complex for MSME. It's supposed to be in one, one ecosystem or one process. So of course, I'm not complaining in this session. I'm just give you a data. So this is my hypothesis. Yeah, of course, again, this is my hypothesis before the pandemic. So I did a small calculation. It said if we successfully upgrade the micro, the micro is that big chunk of entrepreneurs, by only 5%, the contribution of the MSME or the UMKM will increase the GDP by 16%. Of course, this is just my calculation, so that's why I put it as hypothesis. Of course, the challenge is, again, the numbers of entrepreneurs itself, and then the complication, the overlapping, and then everything. Yeah. So I propose in this in this events or in this discussion is, I think the solution we have to create an ecosystem for entrepreneur. Then of course it has to be integrated. Yeah, the boundary, or whatever the complexity of the bureaucracy has to be somehow merged. I think we have a MANCO, a coordinating ministry, but I don't know, maybe they're just too busy, maybe doing helping the COVID situation. And then the big data. Yeah, again, without big data, you cannot do everything. Big data is basically the formula to create a good product or good curriculums, good enterprises. The curriculums also, it has to be standard. For example, Pemprov DKI, for example, material is just like that. Kementerian also different. If you go to maybe UMKM that helped by Bank Indonesia, it's another different curriculum. So it makes entrepreneur, I think, a bit confused. Yeah, and then entrepreneur has to have a mentor. Yeah, it doesn't have the hit and run. Go to one of the training and then you just live like that. And then last but not least, it's digital platform. I think we can see like we have this PPKM ketat, everything just shut down. I always ask my entrepreneurs to be ready 100% digital. Otherwise, this kind of situation may come back again in the next 2 months, 3 months. And it has to be 100% digital. So digital is the keyword. But the data is also so sad. Yeah, data said only 35 or 36% UMKM that has digital connection. So I think the solution is basically to create an ecosystem, or you can call it incubators. So this is my calculation. If we have about 500 city and kabupaten districts here, and then you get 5% of them, and then you turn the entrepreneurs to be a mentor, because you cannot actually rely on the government. The number of PNS or the people in the government is just, the ratio is too small. 64 million compared to numbers of PNS just doesn't add up. The entrepreneurs that we have been taught to be a good entrepreneur must be a mentor. I think that way the ecosystem can hit the 64 million. My target is to increase 4 million micro to small, and hopefully it's gonna help the Indonesia economic recovery. And with Indonesia economic recovery, of course, the social, economic, culture, political also being stable. But it cannot be allowed. Me as just just a coach, I'm just a foundation. It has to be together. So my last but not least message: let's get to work. Yeah, Indonesia is not well currently. It's not healthy enough, especially the economy, but it has to be together. I think that's my message. Thank you very much. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Bapak Faransyah, founder of We Are Indonesia Foundation, for your inspiring presentation on various areas of entrepreneurship and being very honest about the truth of micro, small, and medium enterprises in Indonesia. Our next speaker is Bapak Ali Gufron Mukti, the current President Director of the Social Security Administration Body for Health, or also known as BPJS Kesehatan. Okay, Bapak Ali Gufron Mukti, you have the stage.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you see my presentation and also hear my voice?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Honorable Moderator Alexandra, and of course, Honorable Pak Maliki, Pak Faransyah Jaya, Pak Teguh Dartanto. I'm here being accompanied by my colleague, Dr. Ari, and also Pak Citra. So I was assigned to talk about BPJS Kesehatan, past, present, and future. As we know that is my topic and agenda. First, we are going to talk about brief overview of JKN, then how BPJS Kesehatan could help the society, especially the poor, especially in this COVID pandemic, and then how to mitigate or balance huge spending by BPJS Kesehatan nowadays with the potential income or fund. So there is sufficient budget available. And today or yesterday, we also published in newspaper how actually our budget now and actually how BPJS currently increase the utilization of services. And then what is the long-term vision from BPJS Kesehatan to ensure equality of healthcare services for all people in Indonesia, of course, especially for the poor. And then the conclusion. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, this is the graph of the membership of JKN, which is always increasing and also achieving 82% of the coverage in 7 years in the world's 4th most populous country is considered, of course, by some as an achievement. Because if you see here, membership comparison with other nations, Germany, for example, around 127 years to achieve universal health coverage. And in Asia, usually South Korea mentioned as the fastest country to achieve universal health coverage. It took 12 years, but Indonesia, 82% in 7 years, and government, especially also in Bappenas, Pak Maliki already mentioned in medium-term plan that in the year 2024 or 10 years, we have to achieve 98% of universal health coverage. So this graph or table showed about the visit. So the visit, in the year 2014, 66.8 million, then increasing always up to the year 2019. And interestingly, in the year 2020, the visit rate was decreased. Yeah, hospital outpatient care, also the same thing, always increased, 2020 decreased, also hospital inpatient care, because now, of course, not easy to find bed in the hospital, vacant bed in the hospital. And of course, that people who are not really sick, usually they are a little bit lazy to go to hospital, except if they are, forced by the situation. And we know that I think Indonesian workforce is already mentioned predominantly small enterprises sectors and informal sector worker, which make contribution collection. Of course, for BPJS Kesehatan, it is not easy. It is a challenge. And Indonesia, like Thailand, Vietnam, uses actually mixed financing method, tax-based and social health insurance. But social health insurance, around 98.8 million people are paid the premium by the government, as mentioned by Pak Maliki. And of course, additional sources of funding are available from national, local secret tax, and philanthropy. And now we are trying to have new type of innovative finance to help for those who have difficulties in registering or paying the premium. And of course, there are many innovation in collecting the contribution, for example, automatic saving deduction, financial technology, fintech platforms, many type of platforms, JKN agent, bank agent, and also SMS reminder, and many type of new innovation in not only collecting, but also trying how to solve the problem. Of course, that is the role of BPJS Kesehatan during COVID pandemic 19. First, we are helping the government, especially Ministry of Health, to verify COVID-19 claims where it is not, not easy, but second, because we have already received, BPJS received 1.04 million COVID-19 claims worth around 61 trillion rupiah. And COVID-19 vaccination, as we know that the BPJS staff already developed what they call it PCARE information system for registering, distributing, and recording vaccination data, but also used for primary healthcare activities. Then also we cover post-vaccination adverse event. In Indonesia, we call it KIPI, kejadian ikutan pasca imunisasi. Then what is the impact of the JKN program, especially for the poor? Of course, when I was in Jogja, that time I was the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine, it was published a book entitled Orang Miskin Dilarang Sakit. So it is very difficult for the poor at that time if they got sick. And now actually we change, if the poor get sick, then it is actually forbidden to pay actually, because they already covered. So one of the noble aim of JKN is actually to protect household from catastrophic health care expenditure. And microsimulation study in 2019 shows that JKN prevent 8.1 million people from poverty. I think Pak Maliki also already explained roughly. This equivalent to 17% of the total JKN users in the year 2019. JKN increases healthcare access, including to the poor, of course, and we have this data. Improvement of health access led to improvement in life expectancy. So life expectancy increased around 2.1 year. Improvement in life expectancy, of course, led to the increased productivity and economic growth, especially before COVID-19. And balancing JKN spending, funding, and quality. JKN provider payment system. So we are trying to make a reformation and change from fee-for-service to type of prospective payment system. Then provider payment system challenge, of course, the sometimes under treatment because we use capitation, but now we are trying to have a new type of at least research to find the best type of the payment. Then sometimes, for the cash-based, if you understand about the creeping eruption or some kind of fraud actually, then no link between payment and quality. So our strategies to overcome challenges, we making a link between payment and quality, so pay for performance. Then set payment under limit. We have trying now to implement global budget, and then BPJS Kesehatan exercises its authority to develop more effective, efficient provider payment system through research and innovation. As you see that total health spending up to the year 2019 is it was 490.3 trillion. So it is huge, almost a quarter of our national budget. This from public and non-public. And health spending based on payment system, it is the whole health sectors out of pocket always reduced from around 50% to 32%. Then social health insurance also have increasing the role of the payment, and private still there. Then local government, other minister and Minister of Health. And actually the BPJS Kesehatan in the future, we are trying to have main focuses of our activity. First, to improve healthcare quality. Second, to improve premium collection performance. Then third, strengthen strategic health processing. Then build organization capacity. We make capacity building for our organization. Then contribute to handle the COVID-19 pandemic. At least we are trying to have contribution. And hello, continue for another 2 minutes or 3 minutes. So now we have the quick win actually. First, to improve quality of care based on customer journey, focusing on innovation on many type of Industrial Revolution 4.0 product. For example, we are trying to develop innovation in online information system to shortening the queues. Then we are developing fingerprint, face recognition with artificial intelligence, and many type of new innovation. I cannot mention one by one because of the time. Then improve engagement with all stakeholders to establish JKN sense of belonging, including, of course, I think ISIC and all the, of course, students and all stakeholders. And we are trying to expand coverage by increasing public participation through alternative funding innovation, and also increase the sustainability of JKN. As you know that up to the year 2019, we have difficulties actually to pay in the hospital bill. But now we are happy because the financial condition is better. And of course, that the ensuring high quality of medical services, pharmaceutical and devices, the role of health technology assessment, like in UK they call it what they call it, I forget the name, but I will mention later. Then main function to conduct studies on cost effectiveness and budget impact analysis of new health technologies, then source of funding. Hello? Yeah.
Ada tuh
Continue.
yang wafer dulu udah jual sini, kemudian selesai, di rumah coklat, di itu.
Okay. Source of funding, national budget, BPJS budget, and donor. Then JKN program have consistently improved access to healthcare since its implementation. As we mentioned already, and actually not only increasing the access, but we are trying also to increase the quality. For example, compared to UK, for example, in UK, if elective surgery, it can wait up to, for example, 6 months, maybe more than 6 months. But in Indonesia, in usual situation, I mean in not COVID pandemic, if we would like to have operation, so the waiting list is very fast, less than 1 month. If 1 month, people will, they will complain. BPJS Kesehatan receive special assignment to verify COVID-19 hospital claim, provide a system for COVID-19 vaccination, then to cover post-vaccination adverse event. Then JKN program protects societies, especially for the poor, from poverty and the poor from extreme poverty due to catastrophic health expenditure. And JKN program also improve life expectancy, productivity, and job opportunities. And we are trying to balance spending, funding, and quality. And JKN continuously develop a more effective, efficient provider payment system through research and innovation. And of course, moving forward, BPJS Kesehatan is aimed to improve quality of care through not only engagement with health technology assessment, but many types of innovation we are trying, especially related to the, especially related to the type of Internet of Things and new technology, allow the new emerging technology to enter the benefit of JKN. Now we already provide, for example, consultation online. So our members, they can have a consultation online. Telemedicine is still trying to develop, but Ministry of Health already provides telemedicine, especially for those who are isolated in their house. I think that is all, Mbak Aransa. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Terima kasih Bapak Ali Gufron Mukti, the current President Director of BPJS Kesehatan, for sharing your very informative presentation on the role of BPJS di waktu ini and its future incentives. I know the time is crunched, but our last but not least speaker is Bapak Teguh Dartanto, who is the Acting Dean of Universitas Indonesia's Economic Undergraduate Program and also the head of Poverty and Social Protection at the Institute for Economic and Social Research. While he is unable to attend here live due to family priorities, he has prepared a recorded slide for us. Oh yeah, and I just wanted to say buat yang ada pertanyaan, tolong taruh di chat box-nya ya. Bisa bahasa Indonesia juga kok. Thank you. Okay. Maaf, sepertinya masih mute.
Of Economic and Business Universitas Indonesia. Today, I would like to share about the redesigning the future of the social protections policy in Indonesia that is adaptive, resilient, and sustainable. Our current system in Indonesia has quite good in the term of a design of the social protection in Indonesia. We have two types of the protection. The first is like using the contributory, like using the social insurance that managed by BPJS Ketenagakerjaan or Social Security Agency for Labor and Social Security Agency for Health. And the other one is the social assistance, is non-contributory, including conditional cash transfer, food subsidy program, Kartu Indonesia Pintar, Indonesia Smart Card, or Indonesia Health Card. However, the current system is just focusing on the protecting life's causes event, such as illness, aging, working accident, but missing to protect the event coming from other source, such as the unemployment. Therefore, our system is quite difficult to cope the issue of the COVID-19 when there is many unemployment due to the COVID. The other thing of the problem in our design of the social security system is issues of the missing middle, because the social insurance most likely in those for working in formal sector and that using the contributory. But the lowest income group or the lowest 20 until 40, they are covered by social assistance. Therefore, the people around the 50 until 40 until 18, they are not covered by the system. The missing middle group have no protection because they should voluntarily register and pay their contribution. This difference with the formal sector that they're forced by the regulation, but for the middle class, non-poor middle class, they have to voluntarily register and pay the premium. Therefore, there are two problems because of this. The first, there is the adverse selection problem before the joining the program, because only those who have the high risk to voluntarily register in the system. This is the example for the BPJS Kesehatan. And also there is possibility of the moral hazard, meaning that after joining the program, they're trying to utilize more and more the services. This is the feature of our social security program. There is the other challenge of the social protections in Indonesia. Is the number one is low tax ratio, low the government ability to finance the social protection. Our tax ratio is more or less 10%. It's quite different comparing with the advanced countries like the UK, that is more than 20%, and the other emerging countries. Therefore, low tax ratio means that low ability the government to expand the social protection to cover many more people. The second issue is about the high percent of informality. This is related to the previous one about the missing middle problem. So because the high percent of the informality, this is we face the difficulty to how to force them to join the program and how to guarantee them to sustainably pay the premium. Because by the nature, the informal sector, there is no such enforcement or regulation how to force them to join the program. And the other challenge for social protection in Indonesia is there is a fragmented database. For example, the database for the health, BPJS Tenaga Kesehatan, and BPJS Tenaga Kerjaan, and also the population and the civil registration data, Dukcapil, tax office, and driving license. So there is a very fragmented database. Therefore, this is very, very inefficient because we don't know those who are already covered by health, those who are already covered by employment protection or BPJS Tenaga Kerjaan. The other problem is the high economic mobility of household. In Indonesia, people is very easy to in and out of poverty. In the 1 year, is more than 10% people can in and out of the poverty. Therefore, there is problem with, about the inclusion and exclusion error in the social assistance, because then those who are getting the social assistance should be under the bottom of the 40, but because people very easy to in and out the threshold, so the people there is possibility in the inclusion and exclusion error. The other thing is like our current social assistance system is we have very complicated database social assistance that because there are very fragmented in each system. For example, PKH is a conditional cash transfer having the database, and the foods having the database. Not trying the Ministry of the Social Affairs would like to integrate the data. And also the current database for social assistance is only covering the bottom of 40. So under the COVID condition, the impact of COVID is not only affected the bottom of 40, but it's also affected the bottom of 60 or maybe bottom of 70. So we cannot provide the good protection for those in the middle. The other important challenge for the social protection in Indonesia is non-adaptive social protection. There is an administration rigidity to get the social assistance. For example, those who are already unemployed, and due to the COVID, and they need the assistance. There is no possibility. This is very difficult to, for example, the voluntary register that report that I need the assistance, for example. This is different in the developed countries, that those who have the problem in the your daily life, you can very easy to come to the city office and then register that you need the assistance, for example. This is the challenge for the social protection in Indonesia. And this is just, I would like to give you the brief overview about the economic mobility in Indonesia. The people in Indonesia is very mobile, very easy to in and out of poverty. And also there is no guarantee for the rich people in Indonesia can keep their status, for example. They're very in and out. For example, like in the right-hand side, there is data from 1993 until 2014. There is a different category of the class. When there is a shocks, for example, in the Asian financial crisis, there are many people, many people non-poor becoming poor family. So this is an economic mobility makes the social protection will be very difficult to avoid about the inclusion and exclusion error. This is also the example of the COVID, that the COVID make the people affected around 29 million people. A worker is affected by the COVID, but this is in the August 2020, but in the February 2021, there is reducing. So many people is already re-employed or maybe doing something, starting a business, for example. So due to of the unemployment, for example, this condition makes many people don't have any social protection. For example, many people will drop out in the system. So when you are unemployed and then your contract with your firm is terminated, and then you no longer becoming the member of the social health insurance. You still have the card, but it's inactive. There are 5.4 million people in the August 2020 that they are dropped out of the system. So in Indonesia, yes, good, implementing many things, many policy for national economic recovery program in 2020, and then it's continued 2021. Then I believe that this will be continuous to next year, next 2 years maybe. But the problem is not only the amount of the money allocated for example, national economic recovery, including the social protection, but the other problem is how the ability of the administration to disperse or utilize the fund itself, because the realization of the national economic recovery program is only 85%. Mean that we still have a problem in executing the program itself. So there is this problem in how to combine between the speed of delivery and the targeted people and accountability. So this is the issue that we face in Indonesia. So actually, our government is already have the concern how to protect the people during the pandemic. But the problem, as I mentioned previously, because the lack of the database and then also the procedure for executing the program is also very not well prepared. So the realization is very low. The other thing, the issue, for example, in the case of the social protection, the case of the corruptions by the ex-minister of the social affairs. So this is many people afraid to execute the national economic recovery program because they're afraid to be in jail, for example. This is our social assistance during the crisis. I don't want to explain deeply on this, but actually we're trying to cover more than 50%, the bottom of your 50, especially for electricity bill. So we provide the discount. So this is our coverage of the social assistance during the crisis. And then maybe the last point is how to design the future of social protections policy in Indonesia that is adaptive, resilient, and sustainable. The first, we have to integrate a database. We have to have the single social registry number. So there is an interoperability between the database from the BPJS TK, BPJS Kesehatan, or Social Security Agency for Health, population registration, driving license, tax ID, and others. So if we have the combined, everything has become a single identity. This is very easy to tracking of the problem, and then we can good in designing the program itself. And then it's also in the term of the social assistant, we need to improve the database of social assistant recipient. Be simpler, updated, and cover at least the bottom of 60. And also the openness. People can know, if, for example, the indicator of whatever. The current system, there are many people complaining about the current DTKS, data terpadu kesejahteraan sosial. No, is our Minister of the Social Affairs, Risma, trying to redevelop or redesign the system and the database becoming simpler, updated, and the coverage many people. And the other thing is including the unemployment insurance into the social security system, because under current situation there is no insurance that cover people when there is an economic shock. For example, there is shutdown for the firm, and then they being unemployed, and then there is no protection. Even though there is like a JHT, Jaminan Hari Tua, is all its program, but this is actually should be can be utilized when they in the old age. But when in the middle, there is the problem of unemployment, many people trying to early withdrawal. This is not good. I think it's better to design the new, including the unemployment insurance. And then we have to promote, or we have to design about the on-demand application for social protection, like the Kartu Prakerja. Those who needs in health can easily submit the application. So this is becoming more inclusive and more adaptive. And then in the long run, there is the issue how to reduce the informality. More formal worker means that more contribution and more sustainable of the system. I think that's enough from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bapak Teguh Dartanto, for your very insightful presentation on the current social crisis that further elaborates the discussions of the previous speakers. Another thank you to all the 4 speakers here today. Now we will enter the question and answer session, but as we have limited time, each speaker will be allocated to only answer 1 question. Okay, so the first question is for Bapak Maliki Ahmad. Ini dari Yorga, PhD student from the London School of Economics. Question and answer bisa dijawab dengan bahasa Indonesia ya. He asks, bagaimana memastikan data penerima bansos dan 40% termiskin selalu up to date dari waktu ke waktu? Selama ini kita hanya mengestimasi definisi miskin melalui pendekatan proksi. Banyak pekerja sektor informal yang mendadak miskin, tapi belum ada dalam database, sehingga tidak mendapatkan fasilitas perlindungan sosial. So that is the question, Bapak Maliki.
Sorry, oke. Karena cuma 1 dan waktunya terbatas, saya pakai bahasa Indonesia ya, Bu, Mbak.
Iya, boleh bahasa Indonesia.
Jadi apa yang kita lakukan dalam 1 tahun dan nanti 1 tahun ke depan, 1 tahun yang lalu kemudian 1 tahun ke depan, kami memang menyadari bahwa data ini yang menjadi salah satu faktor yang harus kita benahi segera. Bukan saja data terkait dengan masyarakat miskin ya, tetapi tadi Mas Farhan juga sudah menyampaikan data UMKM pada saat pandemi COVID itu terus terang blank. Maksudnya kita juga nggak tahu, Mas Farhan, dari mana kita dapatnya. Tapi memang jadinya kemana-mana, kita ngumpulnya dari mana-mana gitu. Nah, kemudian karena ada permasalahan data ini, Pak Menteri kami menyampaikan dan juga arahan dari Pak Presiden bahwa Bappenas dan BPS harus segera menyelesaikan permasalahan data. Aset kita punya aset nih, namanya DTKS. Tadi saya sudah singgung sedikit, DTKS itu adalah data terpadu kesejahteraan sosial, di mana sudah di-create banyak dan sekarang dikelola Kementerian Sosial. Seharusnya yang bertanggung jawab di dalam melakukan updating sesuai dengan peraturan perundangan adalah pemerintah daerah. Nah, DTKS itu juga sebenarnya aset untuk bukan saja kita bicara tentang poor ya, yang harusnya mendapatkan social assistance, tetapi siapa saja yang sebenarnya mempunyai pekerjaan satu informal, kemudian juga relatif bisa kita define nanti Mas Farhan, itu adalah siapa yang bekerja di sektor bekerja di lingkungan ultra, mikro, dan juga pekerja usaha kecil. Nah, dari sisi itu kami sebenarnya mempunyai desain bahwa DTKS ini yang tadinya hanya 40%, kita harus perluas menjadi 100% sebagai social registry, social economy registry. Jadi ini melengkapi apa yang ada di dalam administrasi kependudukan, dan ini harus dibangun mulai dari tingkat desa. Jadi dengan variabel yang hampir sama dengan DTKS, kemudian juga diperkaya dengan lokal konten, dan juga adanya suatu proksi apakah mereka miskin, bukan miskin rentan, dan juga proksi bahwa mereka itu adalah bukan identifier ya, bahwa mereka itu pekerja mikro, pekerja entrepreneur ya, kewirausahaan gitu ya. Bekerja sendiri dalam hal ini. Nah, dalam kita mencoba bahwa perluasan dari DTKS ini masih kita convey melalui Kementerian Sosial yang tadinya 40% menjadi 60% tahun 2021. Ke depan 2024 seharusnya menjadi 100%. Kita sedang memikirkan kelembagaannya ke depan dan juga peraturan perundangannya supaya bisa lebih kuat ya. Nah, dalam hal ini yang harusnya memang melakukan updating, pemutakhiran dan juga nanti harus mengelola, kami melihat bahwa seharusnya tingkat desa itu kita harus perkuat. Karena data itu juga dibangun dari tingkat desa. Desa kemudian masuk ke akhirnya ke kabupaten, kemudian ke nasional gitu. Kalau tingkat desa sudah bisa kuat dengan dana desa yang ada, bahkan juga kelurahan nanti mungkin ke depan juga ada, ini seharusnya mereka bisa menggunakan data untuk basis perencanaan di bawah. Jadi bisa dibayangkan bahwa sebenarnya data itu kalau diperkuat dari tingkat desa, perencanaan lebih kuat di desa dan sebagainya. Nah, cuma memang yang harus kita lakukan adalah bagaimana data ini bisa mengintegrasikan semua data yang ada. Kita punya aset data BPJS Kesehatan, nanti ke tenaga kerjaan, kemudian dari Adminduk juga ada, kemudian dari beasiswa pendidikan ada, nanti UMKM juga ada. Nah, ini yang disampaikan oleh Pak Menteri kepada hampir semua menteri, saya kira semuanya juga mempunyai respon yang sama. Bahkan Bu Menteri Keuangan pun merasa bahwa itu adalah opportunity bagi kita untuk meningkatkan pajak collection kita. Saya kira itu Mbak Anca. Takut kepanjangan.
Jadi Bappenas memang strongly berinisiatif untuk fokus ke data agar mewakili semua orang throughout all sectors ya Pak. Thank you so much for your bold answer, Bapak Maliki. Our next question is for Bapak Farhan Syahjaya. Pertanyaan ini dari Logisa Sukmana. He asks, it seems that the pandemic has triggered a rise in informal workers and a fall in formal workers, with informal workers rising to 60.47% of the total country's 128.45 million strong workforce. Meanwhile, formal workers make up 39.53% of the total workforce. It is suspected that this was influenced by Indonesia's low and somewhat inconsistent UMKM. How does this shift in the workforce? So how does this shift in the workforce affect our country from an industrial and economical perspective?
Oke. Yang bisa jawab sebagusnya Pak Maliki itu, nggak apa-apa. Cuman secara umum ya, yang ini menantang lah. Sebenarnya sih kalau dibilang, saya pakai bahasa Indonesia nggak apa-apa ya.
Iya,
Kalau
ya,
dibilang drop ini kebanyakan mereka yang di sektor retail yang memang ada tempatnya. Teman-teman UMKM yang memang sejak awal bisnisnya hybrid, offline dan online, itu sebenarnya tidak terlalu berimbas. Bahkan beberapa yang memang sudah lama mainnya, contohnya ya, bila menyebutkan brand ya GoFood, GrabFood, itu sebenarnya malah increase dia punya revenue. The challenge is sebenarnya sih digitalisasi ini a bit late ya. Ini tantangan untuk everybody lah, tapi kan kita nggak bisa predik bahwa ini akan terjadi. Nah, terlebih lagi ini memang mereka yang bekerja informal ataupun formal. Saya kan cukup rajin ngintip-ngintip LinkedIn ya. Ini menarik ya, banyak teman-teman karyawan ya, ataupun teman-teman pekerja ya. Dia tuh saya lihat beberapa message-nya itu ataupun statusnya itu menarik ya. Tolong dong teman-teman, saya udah 3 bulan nggak bekerja, 6 bulan tidak bekerja, 12 bulan tidak bekerja. Logikanya saya sih, kan sebenarnya kalau misalnya DKI ada dinas UMKM ya, ataupun kementerian juga ada, itu mereka sebenarnya membuat pelatihan ataupun menyalurkan teman-teman pekerja ataupun yang mau belajar sebenarnya entrepreneurship. Nah, cuman kembali lagi, apakah mereka tidak tahu ataukah secara passion memang tidak ada gitu. Jadi sih saya sih mengharapkannya ke depannya bahwa entrepreneurship ini dibina atau diinjek atau ditekankan itu mungkin I think from young ya, mungkin kalau perlu SMP, SMA gitu mindsetnya. Jadi pada saat dia graduate, At least contoh yang paling menyeramkan sebenarnya SMK ya. SMK itu kan menyetor ataupun berkontribusi terhadap unemployment-nya tinggi sekali itu. Saya bahkan pernah mengandai-ngandai kemiskinan ataupun kita bilang pengangguran di Indonesia ini bisa 0 sebenarnya. Selagi dia mau menjadi entrepreneur gitu ya. Nah, cuman kan tantangannya kadang-kadang mulai dari mana, mau kemana, belajar di mana, biayanya berapa. Nah, ini yang memang saya pikir perlu independent organization. Ya kalau saya mungkin bilangnya foundation. Nah, kita tahu mungkin contohnya ada Sampurna Foundation, mungkin fokusnya ke olahraga. Ada Jarum, ya. Lalu ada Jarum Foundation, olahraga. Sampurna Foundation lebih ke kreatif ya. Wiranesia sih berencana kita akan fokus ke entrepreneurship. Jadi everybody can join and it's free gitu. Nah, yang kita minta adalah mereka yang join Wiranesia, setelah itu harus menjadi mentor gitu, karena jumlah UMKM ataupun jumlah mereka yang menjadi entrepreneur itu banyak sekali. Nah, kita sebenarnya bisa switch itu dengan mudah gitu ya, apalagi sudah digitalisasi, bisa pakai handphone belajar ya, tahapannya juga sederhana, tinggal kadang-kadang kemauannya ini yang tough sih. Nah, tinggal buat teman-teman yang sektor formal, informal ya kalau memang sudah ada niatnya, bisa join the entrepreneurship, at least for current condition ya, karena kita nggak ada pilihan lain kan, kantor itu tutup kok gitu. Nah, jadi ya itu sih menurut saya, kalau itu terjadi, kita bisa convert yang mungkin unemployment yang menganggur karena COVID ataupun pandemi, dan kita bisa angkat yang currently entrepreneur micro menjadi minimal small, itu akan contribute to Indonesian economy ya, recovery akan lebih cepat gitu. Memang tantangannya ya kembali lagi, tadi teman-teman dari UI ya, dari Bappenas, memang kompleksitinya tinggi sekali. Ego sektoralnya tinggi sekali. Padahal semuanya tuh ada. Cuman kadang-kadang ya tukang masaknya saya nggak tahu siapa gitu. Begitu Mbak Anca. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih Bapak Farhan for your bold answer and relating it to entrepreneurship that highlights the potential of Indonesia's future shift. Yeah, Wiranesia is a very inspiring foundation that contributes highly to Indonesia's social future economy. Pertanyaan terakhir untuk Bapak Ali Gufron Mukti. The question is, would it be possible for BPJS Kesehatan to socialize with Indonesia's lower income citizens living in rural areas to further support them to get medical help instead of relying on more traditional methods which are more popular in underprivileged areas?
Of course, it is possible. Why not? But of course that BPJS cannot work alone. So, and it is responsibility actually to increase the awareness about health and also the rights for health. And it is not only this, again, responsibility for the BPJS, but also all the stakeholders, especially in the remote area. Then it is actually by law already divide who is actually should responsible for. So in short, I think, of course, we socialized and how actually our community still use traditional herbs. In some cases, I think it is, if it is approved, clinically approved, it is okay. But of course that we need to educate, to literate our community and to increase the awareness. And it is, of course, we can work together. And of course, it is possible. That is my answer, Aranza. Answer the questions?
Yes. Jadi it really takes a village to make a difference, ya Pak. And it takes the focus of awareness and education to develop this.
And of course, we have the data showing that not only for the rich, but for the middle income families, also the poor, increase the at least utilization of care in health facilities. So it is showing that actually the awareness is increasing. But of course, in this pandemic era, it is quite difficult, actually, the situations.
Yeah, definitely. It's progressing, but it's definitely going to take time. Thank you so much for your insightful answer and very honest answers untuk ketiga speakers kita yang hadir hari ini. Thank you so much for all honorable guest speakers, Bapak Maliki Ahmad,
welcome.
Bapak Parancah Jaya, Bapak Gufron Mukti, dan Bapak Teguh Dartanto. Thank you everyone for coming to our session today. Before we close our session, we would like to remind you of the next parallel session we have on offer for you today. So yeah, we will continue again at our next parallel session at 1 p.m. UK time or 7 p.m. waktu Indonesia Barat. Thank you so much everyone for coming.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Terima
Assalamualaikum.
kasih Mbak Ica, teman-teman semua.
Mas Farhan.
Ya.
Makasih.
Terima kasih. Oh iya, Bapak Maliki Ahmad, tante saya bilang salam. Sepertinya dulu di TB bareng ya.
Di SMA.
Oh, SMA. Oh iya. Terima kasih semua.
Makasih Pak Maliki, Pak Faransah, dan Pak Teguh, tapi nggak datang langsung ya. Oke. Mbak Aransa dan teman-teman semua.
Salam sehat, Pak.
Thank you everyone.
Sehat.
Bye.
Assalamualaikum.
Salam.
Salam.
Sehat semua.
Ya.